Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. One of my favorite things is to see the different numbers on what podcast does better than another. And what I find fascinating is there are certain topics that when I release them, they do very well. One of them is corporate social responsibility. There seems to be a tremendous amount of interest regarding CSR. So I had to bring Dan Koval back so we can talk more about that. For those of you who may recall, if you listened to the corporate social responsibility series, Dan Koval is the corporate initiatives manager at Bentley Systems. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate being here. Appreciate your time and love getting to share with your listeners.
Thanks. And I very much appreciate your time. And I was surprised with how much interest there is regarding CSR. There seems to be a tremendous amount of interest. And I do want to talk about that from an emotional perspective when it comes to leaders. And here's what I mean. There seems to be a tremendous amount of interest and curiosity, like on a very high level, a tremendous amount of interest. But for whatever reason, there's not as much excitement as I would think. So there's some type of disconnect where a lot of business leaders, a lot of owners of companies, a lot of people that are in decision-making seats, they have a ton of curiosity. They want to do something as far as pouring into their communities, but there's not a level of excitement to get them to actually pull the trigger. So what do you think the disconnect is?
It's a great question. It's a great way to pick apart the concept of corporate social responsibility. I think being in it, I have my own personal perspective and experience, but I would imagine for those folks outside of it, again, I've been doing this for about 6 years now for a company that's been doing it for almost 4 decades, right? So it's in the culture, it's in the DNA of the company I work at. However, for those that are looking to enter into it, it's not, you don't just put it in a sales pipeline process. You don't just dump it in the front end of a lead gen software sort of thing. There is a part of emotion and a personal touch that should come through corporate social responsibility. I think we talked about identifying the what of CSR, like what is your community and what are you excited about, what impact you want to have. And so I think for most folks, being able to pause what they do on a daily basis to generate revenue, to almost and then turn on their hearts of sorts, and to be able to say, like, okay, this widget is important and I think it's valuable to the economy and I want to produce it and I want to sell it and I want to make people's lives better because of this widget. Great. But then to transition your mindset to be able to say, okay, well, I also want to pour into this section of the community. It's not just that there's no simple A to B solution. And so I think it's the time that it takes to be able to make that mental transition of, producer and earner yourself to giver. Becoming a giver, I think, is not natural for most folks.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A follow-up question to my first would be, do you think people feel that this is so complex and it's not simple enough to do? Do you think that's why people kind of pause and say, okay, I'm really interested, but it's not going to go anywhere because this just seems so complex?
Sure, because it takes work. I was ironically listening to your one of your podcast episodes about podcasting, and the gentleman Ryan you had on he said, like, it takes work. That's why people don't get into podcasting very often, or it takes, that's why people tend to bubble up. Those that are willing to be consistent. It's the same reason why we're not all Olympic level badminton athletes, right? I did some research in my earlier days, and like badminton was like the easiest sport to get into, but to get to the Olympic level, right? Like when you think about like, or like you look at the US curling team, right? You shove this cinder block with a handle down ice, right? It does not take a lot of athletic ability, but it takes consistency and intentionality. And I think that it looks hard to get into CSR because you're like, oh, well, I have to, because there's so many things, right? And you don't need to boil the ocean. You just need to help your neighbor. And I think the semantic of thinking you have to save all the rainforest, you have to save all the whales, like those are great, great missions, and we should absolutely be trying to preserve nature and the environment as best as possible. However, you can make a difference today in what you do, and people just like there's some sort of mental block, like you're saying, it looks difficult or sounds difficult or feels difficult because there's so many things that you can do. And so for folks to be able to just turn their head to the left or right and say, okay, what neighbor, what organization close to me can I help? I think would be like a huge, huge asset just to get the ball rolling.
So I want to talk about the intentionality behind it for a moment, because you did mention work. However, part of me thinks that if companies aren't doing this, they're doing equal amount of work. It's just in different categories. So here's what I mean by that. So I was recently speaking to a company, and I was bewildered by the culture that they have. Now it's very rare that I say that because I speak to so many companies. I know within a matter of minutes talking to numerous people, is their head really in the game? Like, are they really engaged in the company or not? And I spoke with this company, and I was blown away by how many people talked about the culture. It was a reoccurring theme. And there was a gentleman there that worked there for 8 years. He said, I can make so much more at another company, but he said, I'll never leave this company because of the culture. I absolutely love this team. And what's amazing is they do intentional CSR, and they're constantly posting pictures of them as a team in the community, helping the different initiatives that they have. So that's one side of work, yes. But then there's another side of work where there's so many leaders that are complaining about having a revolving door business where they have to continue to hire people and train them, and all the resources, all the time, all the energy that goes into that. Yes, both of those take work, but wouldn't a leader want a vibrant company culture where people that are, maybe they don't have the financial resources to pay them a ton, so they might be getting paid less, but they're fired up beyond belief about the culture? Like, I really want to kind of expand on that intentionality, because yes, it absolutely takes work, but it's almost like if they're not willing to do that, they're going to have to spend more time trying to keep their team intact. Have you seen that, where you go into a company and you recognize that because they're pouring into the community, it creates more of a culture?
Yeah, because I've been with the same company for so long, I don't necessarily always get the opportunity to go into exact companies, but I've seen other nonprofits. I've seen nonprofits that I work with highlight the companies and the cultures. So there are a number of organizations in the region that I live, work, and play in that it's like these 5 or 10 companies are at everything. And they're not at everything with people with frowns on their faces, people complaining, people sad that they're there. Like these are people that like they walk into the room of the rubber chicken dinner and they are smiling ear to ear and they are stoked that they get to be there because they're going to see their friends that they see at all these other events. They know they're doing a good thing in the community. They know they're having fun. They know they're just getting to be part of helping other people. And so like off the top of my head, I could honestly list off 5 to 10 organizations that are similar in culture to the company I work for, in that we understand the value of community. And so there isn't the same turnover, I believe, that is possible at some of the other companies who don't focus on it. The ones that are, like, hey, make sure you focus on your KPIs, your key performance indicators. Like they're just worried about metrics and whatever else. Whereas, right, costs so many dollars to onboard someone, to bring someone into the company, to get them go through the interview process and set up an HR and get their health insurance all situated. It's like, but isn't it cheaper to invest little bits in them and the way they want to interact with the community, and then to keep them and to grow them, right? And so I think that there's definitely a mental difference between those companies that exude community-based culture versus those that are just chasing dollars.
Yeah, it's a good point. So if a company is ready to be intentional, they're ready to focus on work in that arena, where would be a couple places that they could start?
I mean, again, the easiest thing is literally look at, I mean, you have people coming in the office. It is, the post-pandemic era. So who knows if people go in your office, but you look outside your door. Who is physically located to you? I don't know many places that you can go where there are businesses that there aren't also close by nonprofits, community organizations. And whether it's you're in a corporate park, there, nonprofits happen to be in corporate parks as well, or you're going down Main Street, USA, or whatever you're doing, like there are organizations physically located there. Again, but the other side of it is, I think we talked about briefly in our series, was ask the people in your company, what are you passionate about? What do you care about? Where are you already volunteering and serving? Because assumably those employees have vetted those organizations. So whether it's the local pet shelter, the local food bank, the local, boys or girls club, or whatever the heck it is, like if you, Matt, are going out and volunteering your time at some organization because you believe in the mission, hopefully you, as a responsible adult, have also made sure that they're not using it as money laundering, right? And so you have that faith and that trust in your employees, and you're like, oh, you're already volunteering your Saturday to swing hammers at this home renovation organization? Great. We're going to throw them some money because you're involved, and that's just super easy to do, right? Real low bar, real low effort on the corporation's part.
Yeah, and that also gets more buy-in from your employees too. I mean, if you ask them who are you supporting, they tell you, and then you're going to put time and resources into that. I mean, those people are going to be fired up, and that all ties back into that company culture perspective.
Totally. Absolutely. And so whether it's actual physical cash dollars, or is money physical anymore? Or is it like, okay, maybe Matt, maybe you work for the marketing department of some company and you volunteer and you're like, hey, would you want to take a day, a half a day, a couple hours a month and use your current expertise to benefit the nonprofit that you're going to serve anyway? Like, it doesn't have to be money. It can be in-kind services. It could be, one thing that we like to do here is we like to offer up our space, right? We have physical office space. We have some beautiful meeting rooms, a gigantic auditorium that is phenomenal for teaching. We offer that up as space to area nonprofits to come in and use. One, because even if every cubicle was filled, we don't use all of that meeting space all of the time, right? It'd be inefficient for us to be in meetings all the time. But two, there aren't as many people in our office right now. We do have these physical assets, and we can say, hey, come in and use your space, right? The heat's on because it's the winter for us right now. The lights are on, the parking lot's empty, there's plenty of spaces for you, right? We have these other tangible things that people can use and make service of, that it doesn't cost us anything, right? It's one thing to say, oh, I want to give X number thousands of dollars to an organization and that's going to impact our budget. Okay, well, then don't impact your budget. Give time, give your employees the time to go out and do something a couple hours a month, or even just, again, use physical office space that's just sitting there and give people access to it.
It's a really good point. I think it's a really creative way that if a company at least wants to dip their toe in the water, they don't want to put a ton of financial resources or time yet into the game, they could start to open their facilities up to other organizations. And maybe that would start something. That would start a spark in them that they can kind of network a little bit with other nonprofits and kind of feel them out as far as do they want to invest more. So I really like that a lot. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about almost like a cynical element of this for a moment. And I think that this is important to discuss. Being someone that it was in the political world for quite some time, you never turn down a photo op. So, and the reason for that's obvious. You could have the hardest working politician, the most savvy, someone that their heart really is in it, and they have really good intentions, but people don't see that individual behind their desk. They don't see them late hours working for people. They only see what they see in the community. So when someone that is an elected official is out in the community, they want as many pictures as humanly possible because they want to show the community that they're actually doing what they said they would do. Okay. I think sometimes a lot of politicians get a bad rap because it's, oh, they're just doing it for a picture. Well, absolutely. They're doing it to show you that they actually are doing what they said they were. I think there's a ton of missed opportunities when it comes to the CSR piece. So I fully believe that great leaders do want to create an environment that has an incredible company culture. But if you're not telling people that you have an incredible culture, they don't know. And I think there's a lot of missed opportunities, but also I think it's almost a balancing act where you want the intention to be pure, you want people's heart to be in the right place, but also they need to let people know again and again. And with how much noise there is in the world, it's almost like it needs to be strategic in nature as far as what they're using for PR. So do you want to speak to that on maybe organizations you've seen do this really well and maybe they haven't done it well?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I was on the phone with a young lady who runs a employer branding business. So she consults for businesses and helps them establish their brand. And we were talking about the difference between right not generic, but like general sales slash marketing on social media versus employer branding, and how I was telling her that, hey, I was at this one event and one of my coworkers got an award and it was awesome. And we took a couple of cell phone pictures. And then the social media team from my company reached out and they're like, hey, can you send us the original photos that you took that night so that we can then promote this coworker who did a phenomenal job and received this award? And I was like, absolutely. Like, why wouldn't I? Right? I already took the pictures. I already put them on my own social media channel. I'm obviously willing to share them with the world. Why wouldn't I share them then with my social media team? Like, what an easy lift for the social media team to be able to use that in terms of branding, right? They didn't have to be there. They didn't have to drive there. They didn't have to park. They didn't have to do any of that stuff, but they were able to leverage my own personal efforts of the accolades of one of my coworkers and being able to just benefit from that. And so absolutely, we always encourage people to take pictures, 99 times out of 100, it's going to be on your cell phone, short of a well-produced event that we have like a camera crew there for. But everything else is right. Just take a couple of selfies while you're out there. Pick up trash in the local playground or park or whatever you're doing. You're walking around. You're serving in the neighborhood community garden. You're getting dirty. Just somebody take a pause for 1 second. Take a picture because it lasts longer, right? Like it's the old hokey thing. Take a picture, it lasts longer, right? Like, but it's true. It does last longer, and you can reuse it. One of the things I was just looking up because I want to make sure that your listeners were aware of, Matt. And I know, again, we're going to get into the controversial topic of going to work yourself, but Thursday, April 27th, 2023 is National Take Our Sons and Daughters to Work Day. There's a whole campaign, there's a whole toolkit, there's a website, it's a nonprofit, it's awesome. So whether you work out of your home, whether you own a pizza shop, whether you work at a Fortune 500 company and you're in some high-rise building, wherever, it's one of the easiest days to get some great photos and get some great publicity and show some goodness in the community of, hey, we're helping the next generation to see what work looks like. And it's gonna change, it's gonna morph over time for sure. However, it's a great opportunity for you to maybe partner with some of your other corporate partners right? So for example, in our office, we have a fully staffed cafeteria. And so it's like, okay, well, those people come to work. Do they have kids? Do they want to bring their kids to work to see what they're doing in the kitchen, but then also see what we're doing over here in the meeting rooms and the offices? Or maybe we partner with some other organizations in the corporate park itself, and we have like not necessarily a dog and pony show, but like we get everybody together and like, okay, you talk for 10 minutes about your company on medical devices. We'll talk for a few minutes about our company on software. You talk about your company on real estate. You talk about your company on it's a newspaper company, right? Like we just get them all together and everyone, we can have a great, great fun little party sort of thing. And so I think it's just, there's some really easy ways to get some of that great media for publications so that the community knows what you're doing. And the more that you talk about what you're doing, the more that the community is going to reach back out and ask if they can do stuff with you too.
All right, so let's unpack this for a moment because I don't want this to be missed. So one of my favorite things is positioning stories to get traction. What you just mentioned, I want people to see the sheer magnitude of stories that one can get from this. So imagine this for a moment. Someone actually takes you up on this and they actually bring their child to work. Okay, let's just talk about an individual for a moment and then we could talk company.
Sure.
Or even a solopreneur, right? So they take a picture with them and their child. Now, every single day that falls on a year, you mentioned the date in April. Can you say that date again? April
27th.
April 27th. This is year after year. There's an annual thing, right?
Annual thing, yeah.
Okay, so April 27th. So from a content bank perspective, on April 27th of every single year, someone could have in their calendar to post a picture with them and their child. In addition, you can use that same picture a few months later and say Throwback Thursday. It was so awesome to bring Sally to work with me. Bum, bum, bum. Here's how much she's grown since then. She brought up X, Y, and Z that we talked about while she was there. Then you can talk about the values you're instilling in your children that you got from a parent. So for me, I got my hard work from my father. I got my strategy from my mother. I want to teach all my kids how to be hardworking and to be strategic with what they do. I can also talk about the values my parents passed on to me that I'm passing on to my kids. So that's another separate story. Then you could take the picture, you can cut it up into different elements when it comes. You could literally take the picture through different applications on a phone and make the picture look different colors, different backgrounds. Now you have more content. Then you could take it, you could expand this out so much based on one event. You could have 17 different things that you could post on social media. Okay, you can, there's so much that you can do with that. And then you want to talk about rolling this out to a company, like let's talk about a medium-sized company. You could literally designate one person to be the individual that takes pictures. You don't need to hire a professional photographer. I mean, some of the phones they have now, these smartphones, the incredible pictures they could take. One person could just take a ton of pictures. You have 50 people, take at least 50 pictures, if not over 100. That's all that. Then you can build story after story based on each picture. So the amount that you get from just doing this alone is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. It would completely blow up someone's content bank in an incredible way. So I appreciate you mentioning that, Dan.
And I'll take that one more step further for your audience here, Matt, in terms of having real pictures of the real human beings that work for your company make your company that much more attractive to more people. And I think that it enables others to say, I don't know if I can do what they did, but they seem like they're having fun and I like to have fun and I want to go I want to work at that company, right? Think about the impact and opportunity that your talent pipeline gets from things like this, seeing the type of people that work for your company, like, oh, I see that there's, a broad background of folks at this company, or I see that, oh, it's It's a mix of ages. It's a mix of people. It's this, that, the other thing. And they're like, oh, maybe I don't see someone who looks exactly like me. However, I could see me being at that company. Or is, hey, I see somebody that looks like me. Man, that looks like a company that's attractive to me. I think that being able to, you can write out the best job description you want in the world. You can write out the best benefits package you want in the world. But when it comes down to seeing people, real life people, and being able to attach to anything. Oh, they went to the same college I went to. They like the same sports team I like. Like whatever it is that you can connect yourself to at that organization, that's just another opportunity for someone to be like, oh, I remember that company. And maybe when the opportunity comes along, I want to apply for a role at that company. And so I think it continues to deepen the relationships with the community in general, right? Like you're like, oh, that must be a nice company, right? They bring their kids in the office, so it's got to be a nice company. I don't think that, maybe the sanitation workers bring kids on trash trucks. I don't know, probably not safe. So like that might have a negative connotation in someone's head, whereas, the ice cream stand that brings all their kids in and they all get free ice cream that day, like that seems like a really nice place. Maybe I want to own an ice cream stand someday, so just being able to give people the opportunity to relate more to your company.
So you'd mentioned relationship building.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is one of the most important aspects of building a relationship is trust. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting to me is I was putting a ton of different marketing pieces into the world back in about 2019 is when I really started doing intensive marketing. And when I say marketing, it's a lot of it's content marketing. So very much gorged with value. I was doing a tremendous amount of writing from an article perspective. And I was sharing tons of different content pieces in the world, teaching people how to be better storytellers. Okay. So a lot was going into it. There was a major flip, a shift in my marketing when I decided to post a picture with my son. So the story on it is my oldest son. It wasn't necessarily a bet, but he challenged me because I was talking about a certain goal that I wanted to hit in business. So he challenged me and he was like, hey, once you hit this goal, could we get something to celebrate? Preferably a Nintendo Switch. Wink, wink for him. And I ended up hitting the goal sooner than I thought. So for me to be good on my word, I took a picture with him and his new Nintendo Switch. Well, some people might say, well, what does that have to do in the workplace? What does that have to do with business? Well, it captured a business story on me hitting a business goal. And now I'm not just some guy on social media trying to teach people how to do X, Y, and Z. I'm a father. I'm someone that cares about my family. Like the trust perspective radically increased. And this caused a major shift in my marketing where I really focused on sharing more personal stories with business principles intertwined. So we always talk about in business, oh, you have to have like these solid relationships. Well, one of the most important aspects is trust. And if people don't trust you, it doesn't matter how incredible your product or service is, you're not building a solid business relationship. So I appreciate you mentioning that again, Dan, because it really enables people to share things in the world that build that trust. So point well taken. So we talked about a lot of different stuff, Dan. I do want to be respectful of your time. And also, I want people to recognize that there's a lot of resources out there, some of them good, some of them not as wise. So if someone wants to connect with you, they really like what you had to say, what's the best place they can contact you if they have a question?
Yeah, I'm loving LinkedIn currently myself. I am Dan Koval with a K, Koval out there. There's a handful of us out there, but I'm the one that's making the world a better place.
You are the one that is making the world a better place. Absolutely. So, Dan, thank you again. I just want to do a brief recap because I love pulling out at least 3 things that I get from a conversation. Now, there was a ton that I got out of our conversation today, but the top 3 that I want people to recognize that were my takeaways is you said something early on that it sounds simple, but there's so much power behind it. You said, what is your community and the impact that you want to have? I don't think this is a question people should just willy-nilly answer. I actually think they should be thoughtful with this. Literally, what is your community location-wise? Do you serve a town? Are you focused on a regional positioning in a certain state? Is it statewide? Is it the entire East Coast? Is it nationally? What is the community that you're serving? What is the impact you want to have? Actually take time and think about it and then be intentional. That's the second part that I got is yes, it takes work, but it also takes work to have a revolving door business where people come in and then they leave, they get ticked off, they don't want to be with the company. And then you got to hire again. That also takes work. So how do we create a vibrant company culture? It absolutely takes intentionality. And then the third part that I got is just reusing what you have, being creative with it. Just taking your camera and taking some pictures of things that you and your team are doing in the community and all the ripple effects that they could have. So, Dan, a lot of information in this somewhat brief conversation, but it was still gorged with value. I know that I had a lot of takeaways. So thanks again. I appreciate your time and keep doing all the good that you do. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it always.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.